Hello and good morning as you're all getting, good afternoon as you're all getting situated on the call. You all should be able to be joining now shortly from the waiting room. This is Jeff Feldman with the National Association of Social Workers, New Jersey chapter. And I am happy to bring you today the next installment in our Road to November series. This is 1844 No More, Restoring the Right to Vote for Individuals with Criminal Convictions. And I'm here today with Hanol Patel and Ron Pierce from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. So I'm going to turn things over to them to introduce yourself and start the presentation. Ron or Hanol, do you have any slides or anything that you want me to post to the website or share in the chat for people, or are we just talking?
I think mostly we're just talking, but
Okay.
Jeff, you have some of the documents we sent over earlier. If you can share, I know you shared those in the past, but if you can do that during the course of this, or Ron or I can as well, but if depending on the timing, it might be easier.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see what you've sent. If you want to send them to me again, just to make sure I've got them, I can link them on our website and then put them in the chat box.
Yep.
All right.
We'll start with some basics. I will share here to with everyone the link to our 1844 site.
Did you get started?
Yeah, we can get started. And we can go from there. Sorry, that's a link that's helpful. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to be here. And thank you, Jeff, for inviting us. We are so excited to talk about this topic with all of you. And we're so excited about this topic in general. We've been doing a lot of work on this for a number of years, but this year is special for a lot of reasons. I think someone said they can't hear. I don't know if it's just them or if, can everyone else hear me?
I haven't received any other complaints. It may just be the person.
So I just want to make sure it's not me, which is perfectly possible as well. So, okay. So my name is Hanol Patel. I am the director of the Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Ron, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ron Pierce. I am the Democracy and Justice Fellow for the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice.
Thanks. So Ron and I, we work together, and we've been leading the 1844 No More campaign, which, as Jeff kindly called the session, is the campaign to restore voting rights to everyone with a criminal conviction here in the state of New Jersey. So just to give you a little bit of a preview, we're going to talk a little bit about these types of voting laws around the country. They're often called felony disenfranchisement laws, but laws that restrict the right to vote for people with criminal convictions. We'll talk about that a little bit, talk about the racial disparities, and then we're going to go into a little bit about our efforts here in New Jersey, the campaign, and also why it's so important to restore voting rights. Not just the problems of it, but what the benefits could be, what we've learned from people who are impacted themselves, and then leading into where we are right now and how all of you can help, and why it's so important at this moment for this election, because, spoiler alert, in New Jersey as of this year, everyone on parole and probation has the right to vote, which is huge. We're so excited about that. And it's one of those things we recognize that not everyone is aware of, that now our law has changed. People on parole and probation can vote. So it is something that this group, we're hoping, can really take the word out. If you weren't aware, and if you were, I'm glad you were, and then really maybe work together to try to get the word out and also to register people, because our registration deadline, October 13th, is fast approaching. So we want to make sure that people who've long been denied the right to vote, some who've never had the right to vote because they were caught up in our criminal justice system before they were even 18, that they now have, they recognize now that they can vote and can actually exercise it in this big, huge election that is coming up very soon. So like I said, the campaign is the campaign to restore voting rights to everyone with a criminal conviction, the 1844 No More campaign. To put it into perspective, around the country, there are, this is something that's pretty well known. Voting laws are state by state. They're determined by states individually about who has the franchise, who can vote, things like that. There are some federal laws about who can vote in federal elections, but by and large, a lot of what we do is state by state driven, which means that this particular part of it about who is denied the right to vote is also state by state. So you see different laws across the nation where you have certain places, and a level of good news. At the moment, there is no state that is going to deny the people the right to vote for the rest of their lives. At the moment. And that is because very recently, just a few weeks ago, Iowa's governor announced restoring voting rights to a certain number of people. But we still have, and that was excellent, and it is a good move in this country. It's the first time in a very long time, if not ever, that we have not a place where no one is being denied the right to vote for the rest of their life. But not a place where it's not that everyone with a criminal conviction is denied the right to vote for the rest of their life. I want to clarify that, because even in these places, they pick and choose crimes. So there are people who still don't have the right to vote ever because of something, because of an action. So what does that mean? That means that there are still states, Iowa, Kentucky, for example, that on the books, they have laws that are permanent disenfranchisement. That is one level. Their governors currently, their current governors have restored voting rights to a certain number of people, but that is the law right now. There are efforts to change it. There have been, and then famously, I think, I should say famously or infamously, because it's been such a big case, Florida has been probably the biggest, the biggest example of this law and this effort in the last few years. A lot of people have heard about Amendment 4 and all the stuff that's happened afterward. But in Florida, they used to have a law that denied people the right to vote for the rest of their life. And then there was a constitutional amendment that restored it in 2018 to to a certain amount of people. It was people on parole and probation, and once you finish your sentence, but also they carved out some crimes. Everyone else would be, their right to vote would be restored. But now there's been a lot of effort to pull that back. So that was just one extreme. On the other end of the spectrum, and not a lot of people recognize this, but it has had some bursts of conversation here and there, but a lot of people don't recognize that there is the exact opposite of that. And that is, we have places in this country that never deny the right to vote to people with criminal convictions. Maine and Vermont have never denied the right to vote to people with criminal convictions in their entire history. From the day of their first constitution till now, they have never done it. People in prison can vote there. It is consistently done. There have been efforts to try to deny the, restrict, and it has always been defeated. And it is, they believe in the right to vote there. DC just a couple weeks ago restored voting rights to everyone, including people in prison. Puerto Rico allows people to vote. Many Western democracies, Canada, France, if you ever follow their elections, their election officials on social media talk about the voter turnout rates in prisons, because it's not even controversial. It's actually a matter of democracy, that they're like, yes, these are people voting. In the UK, people in prison can vote. It's seen as like a hard right controversial position to believe that people in prison can't vote. And again, Maine and Vermont, chugging along, no disaster with allowing people in prison to vote. Maine and Vermont also happen to be demographically the two whitest states in the country. And now that could be a coincidence, but it's not. Because the reality is that these laws, the vast majority of these laws were around the country were passed before, during, or right after the Civil War. New Jersey, it's in 1844 in our Constitution then that we first tied it to the criminal justice system. It is, there is a historical aspect of this where just when we were on the brink, we were having national debates around the country on what it meant to acknowledge people's personhood, to acknowledge, allow Black people to be people as they should have always had the right to be in this country, and have a say in the government, what that means for some of these laws. So you saw in some places like Mississippi, for example, where when they first started denying the right to vote for criminal convictions, they said that if you committed theft, you couldn't vote, but if you committed murder, you can, because it was believed that a formerly enslaved person was more likely to steal a chicken than to kill the farmer. And they really didn't want that person to vote, to have a say in our government. So that is a lot of the background we're working with. In New Jersey, our laws meant that over 100, up until, let me just talk about where we were in late 2017, early 2018, when we launched this campaign. The Institute launched a campaign, 1844 No More, where we had no one on parole, probation, or currently incarcerated had the right to vote. That is, after some changes over the law, over our history, this is where we were. That meant, in reality, because of our criminal justice system, the way we have it, the racial disparities in it, that was overwhelmingly the number of people, overwhelmingly a lot of the people who can't vote are people of color. So in New Jersey, you have that at the beginning of it, when we started this, you had almost half the people who couldn't vote were Black, in a state that's only 15% Black. As of last year, there were over 100,000 people in the state of New Jersey denied the right to vote because of this law. So that is where we started this campaign, where we wanted to be where Maine and Vermont are. Really, why can't we be like them? Why can't we say that voting is a human right? It is a human right, by the way. It is. It's something, it's acknowledged in the UN Charter. It's something we always talk about. It is a basic human right. And if it is a human right, why is it that any act that someone commits takes away such a basic act of a basic part, a foundational part of citizenship? And especially, and then when you think about the racial disparities, the fact that these laws are so, if by intent or by impact, they are racist, they just should not exist. They are a stain on our democracy. So this is where we were starting. And it was an uphill battle. We knew that. We were told, speaking to other advocates, speaking to people in the state, even people who work in reentry in the state of New Jersey were like, you're not going to get this. There have been efforts for voting rights issues for a long time in New Jersey. There's a lot of voting rights issues we work on, we care about, and a number of them we should be getting to. So if anyone's interested on broader issues, let me know. We're happy to do it. There's so many things we want: same-day registration, early voting, real early vote, all sorts of things. But there were efforts. There was a big effort of just a few years ago, in like 2015, to put together a coalition bill, a Democracy Act bill with lots of voting issues. And this one to restore voting rights, even just to people on parole and probation, was seen as too much of a lift. that they were just not going to do with this legislature. So we had people, even in reentry space, going pick one or the other. See if you can get one. That might be enough to get you, start the ball rolling. There were other groups who even state and nationally that just, when we're putting this together, the way we did this, we launched the campaign 1844 No More with a lot of partners, some who really worked tirelessly on this with us. And when we did that, we had at the 2018 over 100 organizations sign up in support of the campaign, state and local, national organizations who supported this issue. But it wasn't non-controversial. It wasn't uncontroversial, I should say. Probation, but you know what? We're okay with this. If this is the fight we're going to have, we'll join you. There were other groups who were like, we are only here for parole and probation, and that's all we're here for. And we won't necessarily join you. It was not a universal position even amongst advocates, but we really believed and still do that it is important as an issue on principle to be fighting for this. So that's where we came in with this campaign. We released some reports, and legislation was introduced to restore voting rights to everyone. Fully on parole, probation, and currently incarcerated. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ron to share not just a little bit about the push for the law, but also why it's so important that to restore voting rights. Because I know there are always questions and discussions about what it means. So Ron can really discuss that about what this means for individual people and why it's so important.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're in. When we started this, absolutely right. We want to become Maine and Vermont, the two whitest states in the nation. By the way, I just want to make that clear. And though we got parole and probation and had over 45% of those that were disenfranchised, black people, when we break it down now and we gave it to parole and probation, now we have 62% of all those disenfranchised are black, and 76% or 78%, I'm sorry, and we think that's an undercount of Latino, Latinx, are black or brown. So there's a racial aspect of it, no doubt. But this here goes back historically, and why it gets to be personal. Well, first of all, for me, let me say that my father always taught me that voting was not only a fundamental human right. It was not only our fundamental right to vote, but it was also our duty to our community to be part of their chorus. And he told us we would have to listen to the community, ask questions in the community to find out what politicians were in line with the community needs. So after I got convicted and I was in Trenton State Prison, I got a letter that disenfranchised me, right? And when it disenfranchised me, it not only made me feel disconnected from the society, right? But it actually made me feel a disconnection with my father, because this was such an important thing to him. But I understood it to a degree, and at that time I was hurt, but it didn't become more clear until I was in NJ STEP program, a college class that was political science, and the political science class was the history of voting rights of the black population, African Americans. So some use African Americans, but a lot of people would just say the black population. But anyway, while I was in the beginning of the class, people were, my vote don't count. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. I don't know why. And so we started getting into the history of the enslavement of Black people to when the Civil War freed Blacks and gave them the right to vote, and they started winning seats. And so when they started winning seats, you started having the southern states primarily, although other states as well, but you had southern states that started to start this terror by prisoner leasing. So you were going back to enslavement by another name. And then by doing that, they were able to start utilizing disenfranchisement. And then they started doing Jim Crow laws. And this moved into, for a generation or generations, the pain. And after the generational pain, you had the 54 to 68, you had the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement and the Pettus Bridge, Edmund Pettus Bridge thing, and we started talking about that and how this fight gained rights. And so when they lost all those rights to vote. In fact, that county had, I forget, only a couple hundred people out of all the Black people that lived in that county. Only a couple hundred had been registered to vote. And so they started seeing it, and then we started talking about how these rights formed issues in why the school board teaches their curriculum is because the school board is an elected body, and so they started to see this. And by the end of this class, you not only had people changing their mind about whether or not their right to vote was important, but they were asking questions like, well, how can I get my school board to teach my children things that relate to them, that are relatable to them, if I don't have a right to vote? How can I connect to my society if I'm disconnected from that which creates the society norms? How can all this happen? So that class was a spark. It was the spark of hope, and it really lit a transformative fire to see that this here made the connection, and connectedness to a society is very important. So it made the connectedness to a society of why it is that being disenfranchised actually brings a marginalized society. And then we did research, and the research shows that if an adult doesn't vote, their children are less likely to vote, that it's a learned practice. So it is important that nobody loses their right to vote, because now we have, I forget the number, I think 144,000 collateral consequences nationwide, although no one state has all of them. But there are thousands of collateral consequences for people that are formerly incarcerated and people that are incarcerated and people that have committed crime. And why? Because they don't have a voice to say that this here collateral consequence is not benefiting society. This here collateral consequence is hurting society. And why? Because this here disconnects me from being able to provide for my children. This here makes my children feel like they are less than, because you treat me how you treat me. And for people that are incarcerated, when their children come to visit them and they see the treatment, this connects them from society. And all this is because there's no voice to speak with authority, like this is what's happening. So that's why voting rights got important. And so while we were in the throes of this campaign, right, Hanol talked about the first report of 1844, No More, Let Us Vote. That vote showed the historical nature of New Jersey and the disenfranchisement. And quite frankly, 1844 was the year that the New Jersey Constitution put out that only white men can vote. And that's why we named that and showing the historical background behind that. So while we're in the throes of that, we decided we were going to do a little social media campaign. And so they asked me to reach out into the prisons and get some questions on or answers to why they felt their vote, that they should have the right to vote. And the response was so overwhelming that it created a need for more voices. So we created a second report called Value to the Soul. And the Value to the Soul speaks about the voices from inside telling, and people on parole and probation saying why this vote was so important, why the need to be heard, and why the need to be at a table and have the voices heard weren't so important. And so that campaign we utilized when talking to legislators who, in the beginning, a lot of them were not there, but because we were able to change from the abstract to the human and show the human side of things, we were actually able to change some minds. And while we didn't have enough votes for full restoration, we had a significant amount. And that's one of the reasons that we need to revisit the second part of that and get people registered to vote for people incarcerated. But we also need, right now, because we were able in December 18th of 2019, we were able to get the right for people that are on parole and probation to vote, and it took effect March 17th. So I'll let Hanol talk more about the campaign that we had restored, but March 16th was the Covey Lockdown. So the campaign we had for registering people got circumvented, and I'll let her talk more about that. So now that things are starting to open up, and the deadline is October 13th. So now we need as much assistance as we can to not only get the word out, but for people to understand why the right to vote is important. And so now I'll kick it back to Hanol so she can speak more about the campaign itself.
Thank you so much, Ron. As Ron said, we have a law which we're really happy with, in the sense that there's over 80,000 people who have the right to vote now in the state of New Jersey. And another thing is, part of pushing for full restoration, part of having these conversations meant that when the legislature didn't have the votes and said, this is what you're going to, we're going to pass parole and probation, they did so without carve-outs. They did so without extra paperwork. They did so with any of this. So it is a quote-unquote clean law, which is huge itself, because not a lot of states that passed did restore, have done restoration efforts, have not managed to do it, have had extra barriers or carved out people. So who've committed certain crimes. So it is, this is on that end, that is good news. So we have two parts to this, as Ron was saying. We have one part where we are still fighting. We will continue to fight until we restore voting rights to people who are currently incarcerated. So if anyone wants to help in that, please reach out. We are happy to discuss. We are happy to have more advocates, more people working on this effort and talking about it and advocating for it to their legislators. But the second part, as Ron was saying, we've said from the beginning, there's not a lot of, there's not a huge point in restoring people's voting rights if they don't know they're restored. Part of making sure part of the whole aspect of restoring their rights is that they know about it. Otherwise, it's all abstract and it's a matter of principle. But this is about people. This is about individuals and the rights they have. So we need to get that word out now. Earlier in this year, when the law passed in December, was going to go into effect March 17th, we spent the first couple of months of this year really planning out how to get it to as many people as we can. We worked with the state to try to make sure that they were reaching out to people on parole, people who are leaving the prisons, people on probation through the judiciary, and what we can do, and then to try to make sure that they gave notice and ideally registration forms. We worked with a number of partners around the state as we were looking into 2020, which everyone knew going into this year was going to be a huge, huge voter registration year. All presidential year elections are, and this one, everyone anticipated, I think, looks like, it's going to be the case. It's going to be a high turnout election. People are engaged and motivated. So we were working with a lot of partners to try to get word out. There was going to be planned a lot of registration drives up all over the state on March 17th and the days following and through April to try to get to as many people as possible. And then, as Ron said, COVID hit. And as with just about every aspect of our lives, it definitely had an impact on this. So we saw that the state, the DOC, parole board, reprioritize their priorities. So this just wasn't something they were getting the word out on. Registration efforts around the state just came to a halt, essentially, all across, not just for this, not just for people on parole and probation, just generally, because of COVID. No one was hosting in-person drives. So that was a problem. Things have picked up. They absolutely have in the last couple of months. But if you look back, you'll see our voter registration numbers across the state of New Jersey plummeted over there for a few months there. Were just terrible. That if you look at May, for example, May 2020, in comparison to May 2019, our numbers were, our rates, registration rates were 500% down. Compared to 2016, it was almost 1,500% lower than the numbers we usually see. And 2019 was not, we had a big election in New Jersey. The assembly is incredibly important. We think it is, and we were really trying to get the word out, but let's all be real. Registration off-year elections don't have the highest level of engagement. So this was, the fact that we saw such a drop even from last year was huge. So it's a problem, and it especially became a problem for people on parole and probation who never knew they had the right to vote. So getting that word out was a challenge. So this is where we are now. There are lots of efforts being done. The Institute has formed a council that Ron leads that is working on formerly incarcerated people who are working on efforts to restore people with the right to register people who now have the right to vote. So if anyone is going to host a drive or has someone who isn't sure, wants to have a discussion, please reach out. We can connect them to Ron. Ron can speak with someone, or we can have maybe someone on the Race Council can come and discuss this because it's really important to talk to people who are impacted themselves to make sure this is as effective as possible. Online voter registration, which we now have, and I know this with the Road to 2020 sessions that it might have already been discussed, online voter registration. Jeff, have you guys already kind of gone through it?
We did, yeah. We had a session with the League of Women Voters of New Jersey on the 14th about registering to vote and what it's going to look like. So if anybody didn't see that, you can access it on demand on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat box. And also, Hanol, is it okay if I share your email and Ron's email in the
Yes, absolutely. You can share either one of us. You can reach out to us directly. You can also email vote@njisj.org. We check that as well. That's the broad one. So yes, and then registering, yeah, Jessie Burns from the League, she, you can listen to her tell you exactly how to register. Online voter registration has been crucial, and we have a good system. It took us a long time to get online voter registration, arguably too long, but now that we have it, it's actually a solid system. It's pretty intuitive, user-friendly. It works on tablets and cell phones, not just a computer. So it's really helpful. So we encourage you to use it. And so we have one big ask that we have of everyone on this is, one, get the word out. If you know anyone who is impacted, please tell them they have the right to vote. If you've already been doing that, encourage them to register, give them the tools to register. The link is one way to do it. If they need a paper registration form, those are available online that can be printed out, or every single county clerk's office has them. So those are available. Please get the word out. Try to inform as many people as you can about this effort before October 13th, because the registration deadline is upon us. And if there's, like I said, if there's a registration drive, or if you're talking to someone individually and they have questions, we're happy to answer or connect them with someone who can answer. We shared at the beginning a flyer. The flyer in the front is just about that there's a new law, rights restoration, but on the back is an FAQ. And if you look at that, it kind of goes into, and I could, if we have a second, I can share my screen and kind of do that.
Let me make you a co-host. I don't think you can share while I do that.
And I just wanted to go over a little bit really quickly on it. And I saw some questions, and we will definitely try to answer them.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so this is the flyer. I think everyone can see this now, right? Okay, so this is the back, which is the FAQ. We put this together. Ron really worked hard on this with other impacted people. We put together questions with answers where the audience, where the reader is intended, we expect to be an impacted person themselves. So someone who might be on parole, probation, or has a previous criminal conviction, what they would need to see to believe that they have the right to vote. And this is really crucial because, and Ron will tell you, can tell you this, that one of the things we realize is that, you know, when you have these state by state laws, you're hearing word from around the, you're hearing word about these issues in different places. You hear word about, you know, Texas penalizing, you know, charging someone who voted with, you know, accidentally, essentially, who didn't realize she couldn't vote while she was on, because she was denied the right to vote because of a criminal conviction, and voted and didn't realize it was a problem, and now she's serving time for it. So when you hear these types of things, you're less likely to believe them. So just because, you know, I'm sitting here at a registration drive and someone goes, oh, well, I can't vote because, you know, I'm actually on parole, and I'm like, no, you can. They might not believe me, random stranger. They might believe a lot of you who are social workers who might be working with them directly. We do believe that the people they're most likely to believe, we strongly hold the view that it is people, they're parole officers, for example, or probation officers. They're the ones they're most likely to believe. If they tell them this is not a parole violation, you are going to believe them. So we are still working with the state to try to make sure that they're the ones getting the word out. But in the meantime, if it's us doing it, what information do people need to know to trust it? So this is how this was done. You know, the Secretary of State's office has actually reviewed this, so you can, like, it's not just our word on it. It's all, this is all approved language. This is real. And hopefully this can help you when you're having conversations to address, that can convince people that they do have the right to vote. There still might be some reticence. So if that's the case, please reach out.
And just, sorry, FYI about that document, I just put the link back in the chat.
Yes, thank you.
Current thing in the chat. And also, if you can't access it there, it's also linked on the Road to November website on the NASW webpage now.
All right, I see one question from Debbie Schlossberg. I apologize if I said that wrong. About what can be done about barriers like what we're seeing in Florida, requiring payment of court costs, etc. And is this a priority for the various re-entry programs in the state? Great question. So, Florida, you know, when you're doing the work we do, it's a little heartbreaking to see about how the voters really put something on the ballot. Voters, you know, through a democratic measure, through democracy, voted for something, and then it's being really pulled back by the state government and the judiciary. So it is the way they're reading the effort is that if there's any court costs restitution that needs to be paid, it must be paid as part of the sentence before they can vote. Because the ballot measure said once they're completed their sentence, they can vote. It's complicated in Florida, really complicated, because of a lot of people don't even know what they owe. They don't have a centralized system to even find out where, like, how much money is that they owe, and even if they ask the state, a lot of people don't know. Depending on how long ago their conviction was, there's just their paper record somewhere in a file that if you ask literally your county clerks, if you ask DOC people, they just do not know, which is why it's an additional challenge too, because there has been a lot of efforts. It is one of the bigger news pieces around the country, but the voting rights restoration, the one topic that has actually broken through and everyone really knows about across the country, is Florida. And so you see a lot of people, you see organizations, wealthy people, celebrities wanting to donate and try to help clear out those costs. And to an extent it is working, but the biggest challenge is that, you might have money, but if you don't know how much it costs, you can't clear out the debt. Nobody knows how much is owed. So that is a huge challenge they're dealing with in Florida. And we, they have amazing advocates in Florida working on this. If you want to look up Desmond Mead, if you want to look up the Florida Rights Restoration Project, you should reach out to them to see how they would recommend helping them directly. As to the question broadly for other states, yeah, it is a concern. It is something that is always discussed amongst rights restoration advocates on when they're pushing for rights restoration, what that means. And this shouldn't be a barrier. So you do have some states that do have this. It's not just Florida. There are still states around the country that have this in effect. New Jersey, we are fortunate, we do not. We do not have that. Our law, when I said it's a clean law, that's what it means. That if you, our law as written now, it says that if during your period of incarceration, you do not have the right to vote. That is all. So if you are on parole, if you're on probation, you do not need to fill out an extra sheet of paper. That is the case in certain states. You do not have to pay extra. There's no restitution, nothing like that. You just register to vote and you vote. In fact, it actually is something that got fixed with this law that we worked on, because in the past we've one of the things that kept people on parole or kept people on probation was owing fees. And New Jersey kept people on parole and probation if they owed fees or costs. And now it's just not an issue. Like they have the right to vote even if they're on parole and probation. So it is fortunately not an issue here because of the law that that passed and that we now have in play here. But it is definitely a conversation. That is definitely an issue that people work on when we're doing this across the country.
Yeah, it looks like Debbie has a follow-up asking about probation officers. And I think I'm just going to expand that question a little bit. She's asking, it looks like, if probation officers have the info as far as the amount that individuals might owe in court costs.
I assume you mean for Florida because of the issue. Not really. Here's the thing about Florida, and here's the thing that happens with a lot of these states. When your law says someone can't vote for the rest of their life, which is what Florida was, the biggest issue isn't the people who are currently on parole and probation. Those people know how much they owe, or even the people who just got off of parole and probation, right? Because though you have, we've digitized a lot of records. The issue is you might have someone who was on probation for a year, 30 years ago. And those probation officers might not even be probation officers anymore. Like there's nobody around to tell them. Nobody of their old parole or probation officers might not, may have retired, may have moved, may not be around. And there's no digital copy. There's none of those. So those are the huge issues you have when you have lifetime disenfranchisement, because it really does go through generations. So you have people going back and trying to figure this out for something that happened, a very long time ago. Should registering to vote be part of parole as a requirement? let me clear one thing we've been pushing for. We do want parole to be more, but like to encourage people to register more directly. We're hoping, for example, New Jersey has AVR, automatic voter registration. It's under MVC, so motor vehicle. But our law that was passed in 2018, which we were so happy passed, we helped worked on, we advocated for with partners. It passed. It is for motor vehicle, but the law as written allows for any state agency to become a automatic voter registration agency. So we've been advocating for them to expand that to other agencies, including, for example, Medicaid would be a great one to expand to, capture a lot of people who aren't captured by motor vehicle, to have the ability to register and do that. Parole is a good one. DOC, these are things that the state has the ability to do and we're advocating for. Should it be required as a prerequisite in order to be on parole? No, I don't think so. I'll let Ron chime in on this. He might have some ideas, but I would say no. Making those things mandatory, one of the issues when we have for criminal justice, you shouldn't put additional requirements on people that we don't put on everyone else, especially for things that don't have any other, like, what are we doing here, right? It's not, when we talk about, like Ron talked about collateral consequences, right? There are certain things we might put on people on parole. We might put restrict on them because of public safety reasons, right? Like one that's often talked about is the right to own a gun, right? And the Second Amendment and some restrictions on that. If you're the other ones that we put on people, they're clearly just for penalties. They're not doing anything. That if anything, we're just adding burdens. We're making things harder for them. So then you get to this. This is supposed to be something that helps and gives them a connection. Adding on an additional barrier for someone and a burden that we don't put on the rest of society is unfair, and we shouldn't be doing it. Also, even putting it on everybody, I mean, there are some concerns about First Amendment concerns just generally forcing people to be registered. Although I guess the question is, can you register them but not require them to vote? But I mean, I guess fair enough. But I still think we shouldn't be putting additional barriers on people that we're not putting on anyone else without a clear need to do so, like a clear public safety need. Ron, I don't know if you had.
No, I totally agree with you. We're forcing somebody to register to vote does not give them especially when over the period of their incarceration, they were forced to follow structures and authoritarian regimes that they had to do this or that or the other thing. And that's what, when you're on parole, that's what you're trying to transition them from, to bring them back to a free thinking society rather than an authoritarian society, which is what they are incarcerated. So by forcing them to register, you're actually probably taking away their ability to not only want to register and vote, but their ability to see that that is part of the transition back into society. So no, I don't think you should ever force anybody to register to vote. Not any free person, not any incarcerated person, not any person on parole, probation, or any other means. I think that is a free choice. It should be greatly encouraged, but it should not be a condition of parole. That would kind of defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect them to a free society. A free choice is a free choice. So yes, encourage, yes. Force them to, no.
Great. We've got about 10 minutes left. If there are other questions, I welcome you all to submit them into the chat, and we'll take those questions. Just to kind of expand a little bit while we're waiting for more questions on the questions that have come up around parole and probation. you know, Ron, you had mentioned earlier when you were speaking, I think that you learned a lot of this when you were in the NJ STEP program. I'm just wondering, so for folks that are on parole right now that have probation officers, are they getting this information from them at all? Or is it really not being shared that way?
That's a good question. Originally, when the law first came out and we started reaching out to the Department of Corrections, we started reaching out to the parole board, and we started reaching out to the Office of Administrative Office of the Courts, because that's who runs probation in New Jersey. We had a lot of positive feedback that they were not only gonna put flyers up in their offices, they were gonna speak to their charges. And so then COVID hit. COVID is really a detriment in so many different ways, other than people getting sick and dying, which is really terrible, but it also affected so many other aspects of societies moving forward. And one of the things was the Department of Corrections didn't change their material in any due time. I heard that now the packages include the information that you have a right to vote upon release from prison. Parole, when I spoke to a specific parole officer, he didn't even know about the law. And so then after I told him about the law and he looked into it, he said, oh, our office is doing it on intake of people just coming out of prison. They're letting them know that this law has changed. But that didn't help the 83,000 people on parole and probation. I don't know what percentage of that. We used to have that percentage. I don't have it in my head. But so that didn't help those. So I talked to him about that. And now he does speak to people when he sees them, his parolees, to tell them that they have a right to vote. But it's not that he wasn't willing to. It's just he didn't know to. And some are more like that, some are less like that. You know, and just like any other walk of life, you're going to have some that are more willing to be helpful, and some are more restrictive. So the reality is we're not where we need to be in that department. But we do have commitments, especially from the Office of the Courts, that they have told their probation officers, because the office, like I said, officers of courts control probation. They have told their probation officers to let everybody on probation know this law is existent and to try to tell them. Now that gives them the structure that, okay, you have a right to vote, right? But the real need, and the need from what I would ask the people on these call, is the real need is, even if they have the right, then they know they have the right. Now they need to know why that right is important. And that to me is the bigger lift, you know, because if we don't know it's important, then we're going to be at that starting point of that political science class of my vote don't matter, or my vote can't count, or it doesn't matter. I'm not really part of this society because they've always made me the other rather than the part of society. So yes, we still have more to do, but yeah, we have been working with the organizations to try to get the word out.
Yeah, we know parole has been keeping track. I'll add, probation has been keeping track, and we know they've told at least over 30,000 people have been informed. They're not giving registration forms, but they are telling them. So that's at least partly good. We're working on everybody else.
And just so we can cover it again, for those of you who want to help people register to vote, in New Jersey, you can vote, you can register to vote right online up until October 13th. And I'm going to put that link in the chat, and you'll see when you go there, there should be a, if I've got the right link, there should be a register to vote voter information portal Just trying to find the right link. There it is. So let's put this in the chat.
I'll also put in, here's our voting information page. So if you have any questions, or I know you already had a session on broadly, and you're going to have a lot more on how to vote for November's election, which is a different type of election than we've seen in the past. But if in case there's any questions, you can check on there. And yes, you can encourage people to register. I can also give you, there is, I think, a more direct link than the one.
Be online.
Here we go. That one, the one that ends with register.
Great.
You can go from the one Jeff sent as well. They actually did kind of centralize the portal, but in case you want to like link to us, send it directly to anyone or text it so that they can pull it up and register directly, you can share that one. Like we said, please, if you know any impacted people, please tell them that they can register and that they have the right to vote, and they can and should register and vote. One other thing I should have mentioned when we talked about AVR, automatic voter registration, New Jersey does have it through motor vehicle. One thing they did do is now in motor vehicle, they took away the slide that said if you're on parole and probation, you can't vote. So a lot of people, when they are going for a driver's license or a non-driver's license motor vehicle ID, which a lot of people do have to get through in order to, especially when they first leave prison to start going on to visit parole offices, they will ideally be captured through that. So we are hoping that is working and is effective, and we did share materials there. But yeah, so there is that effort going on as well. So in case someone asks if they're going into get an ID, you can tell them they can register through that. There is a system there at motor vehicle. If anyone had any other questions, but we're about
I
done.
think looks like we're just about out of time. I do have one quick follow-up question just for folks who may be watching from other states. We're fortunate to have a great organization like the Institute for Social Justice here in New Jersey that is doing this work. If there are folks looking for information in states outside of New Jersey, is there a general clearinghouse they can go to for information? Like what's the best way for them to find out what the current laws are in their states?
Good question. I can tell you how to find out the current laws. I'll share a couple of links right now. And then I will tell you who to reach out to. So the Brennan Center has a really good map that's pretty accurate, that lays out what the current state of the laws are. Here's a link. And then one we find particularly helpful is the appeal, which if you haven't heard of, you absolutely should. It's a fantastic news source. They do a lot of work on criminal justice efforts. They have excellent maps. Here we go. I see that all my links are kind of becoming part of one. The appeal has a map that kind of talks about the efforts from state to state. So the different legislation that was introduced, a different effort through other action to restore the right to vote more broadly. So you'll see which states have had active campaigns, and there's a number of them. So New Mexico has had a huge, an active campaign to restore voting rights to everyone, including people in prison. Massachusetts has had one going, an active one. Hawaii, Nebraska, Virginia. Virginia's trying to put it on their ballot. If you want to help them there, New York, obviously here in New Jersey, you can reach out to us. So this has a pretty good layout, and on the appeal, you could check, if you go to the different states, if you read their articles, you can probably find names of the different local advocates. If you are curious about a specific state, you can reach out to us. We are in touch with a lot of orgs around the country, and we can probably connect you, but a couple of organizations who do this nationwide who might be able to help. One is the Advancement Project. They have been connected to a lot of rights restoration, have been supporting a lot of rights restoration efforts through in different states around the country. They're a good org. And another one, Brennan Center, does a lot of work in different states as well. Brennan Center, those two are ones you can check or reach out to if you want to do that. But you can reach out to us and we can help you find, connect you with local advocates who are often who can help you. Especially if you're in a state itself, a local advocate might be organization might be able to tell you where exactly you are in where the effort is in the state. So they're a good source to get to, particularly if you're interested in helping with full restoration.
Great. Well, Ron and Hanol, thank you both so much for being here with us today and for sharing all this about such an important topic. And as we all know, the stakes of this election just keep getting higher. So we really need to make sure that everybody who is eligible to vote and wants to cast a vote is able to do so. We'll be posting the link to the archived version of this webinar on our website within the next 24 hours. So if you'd like to share this with other folks, it will be available. And thank you both again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Really
have a great day.
You're giving this an effort. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ron. Bye-bye, everyone.